The war between humans and the Exiled Empire had lasted for years, with countless battles fought across the galaxy. Despite their advanced technology, the Exiled had been unable to crush humanity's stubborn resistance, but neither side had won. The war had reached a standstill, leaving both civilizations exhausted. Commander Daniel Carter was one of the finest soldiers humanity had. Skilled, determined, and fiercely loyal to his people, he had survived battles that should have been his end. But this time, luck had abandoned him. Captured during an ambush, he found himself standing before the ruler of the Exiled Empire, Queen Soraya. The queen was unlike any alien he had seen before. Tall, regal, with golden eyes that burned like twin suns, she radiated power and authority. Her dark, metallic-like skin shimmered under the palace lights, and the sharp crown-like ridges on her head only added to her fearsome presence. But there was something else, something beyond just her intimidating appearance. There was intelligence, curiosity. Daniel expected execution. He was, after all, an enemy soldier. Instead, Soraya studied him, silent and thoughtful. "You are different," she finally said, her voice smooth yet commanding. Daniel clenched his jaw. He refused to bow, refused to show weakness. "If you brought me here just to insult me, get it over with." To his surprise, Soraya smiled. "I could kill you, human, but I find myself intrigued." Daniel frowned. "Intrigued? You fight as if nothing can break you. Your species is weaker than us, yet you continue to defy us. Even now, you do not beg for your life." She leaned forward slightly. "That is rare." Daniel met her gaze without fear. "We don't break easily." Soraya studied him for a long moment before she spoke again. "The war has cost us both greatly. I wish to propose something different." Daniel tensed. "A negotiation?" She nodded. "We fight, but we do not gain. This war has become meaningless. Perhaps it is time we try something else." Daniel narrowed his eyes. "Why tell me this? I'm just a soldier." Soraya's golden eyes gleamed. "Because you are more than that. I have seen your battle records, your victories. You are respected among your people. If there is to be peace, we must understand each other." Daniel wasn't sure if he believed her, but one thing was clear. If the Queen of the Exiled wanted something, she would get it. That night, Daniel was not thrown into a cell. Instead, he was taken to a guest chamber, far more luxurious than anything a prisoner would expect. Soft alien fabrics covered the bed, and a window overlooked the glowing cityscape of the Exiled capital. It was a strange feeling, being treated not as a captive, but as an honored guest. Still, Daniel knew better than to trust his captors. Days passed, and Daniel found himself summoned to Soraya often. Their conversations were long, sometimes tense, sometimes surprisingly calm. She asked him questions about Earth, about humans, about their history and resilience. In return, Daniel learned more about the Exiled. Unlike humans, they lived centuries longer. Their empire had thrived for thousands of years, yet they had never encountered a species as unpredictable as humanity. One evening, as they stood on a balcony overlooking the city, Soraya spoke in a softer tone. "Your kind fascinates me." Daniel smirked. "Because we refuse to die." She gave a small laugh, something he had never heard from her before. Perhaps. Then her expression turned serious. "Tell me, Daniel Carter, if you had the power to stop this war, would you take it?" Daniel thought for a moment. "If it meant saving my people, yes, but only if I could trust the peace." Soraya's gaze lingered on him, unreadable. "Then let us see if trust is possible." Daniel didn't know what fate awaited him, but one thing was certain: his life was no longer just his own. Something bigger was happening, something that could change the future of both their worlds. Days turned into weeks, and Commander Daniel Carter remained in the Exiled Palace, no longer a prisoner but not exactly free. His conversations with Queen Soraya became more frequent, shifting from formal discussions about war to deeper conversations about their species, their beliefs, and even personal experiences. Soraya was unlike any ruler Daniel had ever met. She was powerful, commanding, and feared by her enemies. Yet there was something else beneath her cold exterior, a quiet loneliness. One evening, as they walked through the vast gardens of the palace, Soraya spoke in a thoughtful tone. "Do you ever wonder what it would be like if our species had met under different circumstances?" she asked. Daniel glanced at her. "You mean, without the war?" She nodded. "Perhaps as allies, or even friends." Daniel sighed, running a hand through his short brown hair. "Hard to say. We humans don't have the best history when it comes to first contact. But I like to think we could have avoided all this bloodshed." Soraya studied him, her golden eyes reflecting the soft glow of the floating lanterns in the garden. "Your kind is unpredictable, but I admire your resilience. I have met many warriors, but none like you." Daniel smirked. "Is that a compliment?" Soraya's lips curled slightly. "Take it however you wish, human." For the first time since his capture, Daniel felt something shift between them. It was subtle, but it was there, a connection neither of them had expected. An act of loyalty. The peaceful moment didn't last long. A few nights later, Daniel was woken by the distant sound of alarms. The palace was under attack. Jumping to his feet, he grabbed a small dagger he had hidden under his pillow. His instincts told him to run, to find a way out, but something made him hesitate. "Soraya." He rushed toward the queen's chambers, pushing past guards and soldiers. When he arrived, he found her standing tall, her hands glowing with energy, as she defended herself from masked assassins. Without thinking, Daniel lunged into the fight. He was outnumbered, but that had never stopped him before. Using his strength and speed, he took down 2 assassins before grabbing one of their weapons. Soraya fought beside him, her movements sharp and precise. Together, they struck down the last of the attackers. As the silence settled, Soraya turned to him, breathing heavily. "Why did you help me?" Daniel wiped blood from his face. "You think I'd just stand by and watch you get killed?" She stared at him for a long moment before stepping closer. "You are a strange human, Daniel Carter." He smirked. "You're not the first to say that." Soraya let out a rare chuckle before her expression grew serious again. "This attack was not random. Someone within my court wants me dead." Daniel crossed his arms. "You think it's because of the peace talks?" She nodded. "Not everyone agrees with my decision. Some believe our empire should crush humanity, not negotiate with it." Daniel exhaled. "Sounds familiar. We have people like that too." A dangerous bond. After the attack, Soraya insisted that Daniel remain by her side as her personal guard. It was an unusual decision, but no one dared to question the queen. Their time together increased, and with it, so did the unspoken tension between them. One evening, Soraya found Daniel on the balcony overlooking the city. The stars above were unfamiliar, but Daniel had stopped feeling like an outsider. She stood beside him, her long, elegant robes shifting in the breeze. "Do you regret staying?" Daniel shook his head. "I don't know anymore. Maybe I should, but something about this place feels different now." Soraya turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "You are different, Daniel. I have never met a human like you." He chuckled. "That makes 2 of us." For a moment, they just stood there, the silence between them charged with something neither of them was ready to name. Soraya took a step closer. "There is much I do not understand about your kind. But there is one thing I know for certain." Daniel met her gaze. "What's that?" She hesitated, then said softly, "You are no longer just a soldier to me." Daniel felt his heartbeat quicken, but before he could respond, Soraya turned away, leaving him with thoughts he wasn't sure he was ready to face. Something was changing between them. Something dangerous. And for the first time, Daniel wasn't sure if he wanted to stop it. The days after the assassination attempt were tense. Security around Queen Soraya increased, and Daniel found himself constantly on guard. He wasn't just an observer anymore. He was part of the chaos, standing beside her as both protector and confidant. But something else was happening, something neither of them fully understood. Their conversations had grown deeper, their silences heavier. It was as if an invisible thread connected them, pulling them closer. Daniel told himself it was just the circumstances, a soldier protecting a queen, a human surviving in an alien empire. But deep inside, he knew it was more than that. And then, everything changed. A strange change. One morning, Soraya didn't attend her usual court meeting. This was unusual. She was always punctual, always in control. The palace staff whispered in concern, but no one dared question her absence. Daniel, however, did. He went straight to her chambers, pushing past the royal guards. The moment he entered, he found Soraya sitting near the window, staring at the city. Something was wrong. Her golden eyes lacked their usual fire, her posture more relaxed than usual. There was something different about her, an exhaustion he had never seen before. "Soraya," he said, stepping closer. "Are you all right?" She turned to him slowly, studying him for a moment before speaking. "I am uncertain." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" Soraya took a deep breath, her expression unreadable. "My body feels strange, unbalanced." Daniel sat across from her. "You should get checked. Maybe it's poison." She shook her head. "No, it is not an attack." She hesitated before adding, "I believe it is something else." Daniel didn't understand. Something else. Soraya was silent for a long moment. Then, with a deep breath, she finally spoke the words that would change everything. "Daniel, I am bearing your child." Shock and silence. The room fell into complete silence. Daniel blinked, certain he had misheard her. "What?" Soraya's golden eyes met his. "You heard me." Daniel's mind raced. This wasn't possible. It shouldn't be possible. Their species were different, completely different. And yet here she was, telling him the impossible. "You're serious," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Soraya nodded. "I have no doubt." Daniel leaned back, exhaling sharply. "How? I mean, how is this even possible?" Soraya's expression was calm, but he could see the conflict in her eyes. The Scifi have never conceived with another species before. It was believed to be impossible. But something about you, about humans, it seems we are not as different as we thought. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "This is insane." Soraya let out a soft breath. "Perhaps. But it is real." The weight of a new future. Daniel stood and paced the room, trying to process everything. And here, a child, a living bridge between two species locked in war. "This changes everything," he muttered. Soraya nodded. "Yes, and not just for us." Daniel stopped pacing and turned to her. "What happens now?" Soraya looked out the window. "The High Council must be informed. Some will see this as a sign of unity. Others will see it as a threat." Daniel clenched his fists. "A threat?" Soraya's gaze darkened. "There are those who believe our empire must remain pure, that a child with human blood is an insult to our legacy." Daniel exhaled. "So, what? They'll try to stop this." Soraya's voice was quiet but firm. "Yes." Daniel felt a cold anger rise in his chest. "Then we won't let them." Soraya studied him for a moment, then gave a small, knowing smile. "You are ready to fight for this." Daniel didn't hesitate. "Of course I am." Soraya reached for his hand, her fingers brushing against his. "Then we will face whatever comes next, together." Daniel looked at her, at the woman who had once been his enemy but was now something far more. This war had started with hatred, but maybe, just maybe, it could end with something else. The news spread faster than Daniel or Soraya had expected. Within hours of the Queen's revelation, the High Council was in chaos. The idea of a half-human, half-Scifi child was something no one had ever considered, let alone accepted. Some saw it as a symbol of unity, proof that the war could end in peace. Others saw it as a threat, an insult to their proud empire. And some wanted the child gone. A growing threat. Daniel stood beside Soraya in the Grand Council chamber as arguments erupted around them. Exiled nobles and military leaders shouted over each other, their voices filled with either excitement or anger. "This is madness," one elder growled. "A child with human blood. It is an abomination." Another noble, a younger woman, stood in defiance. "No, this is a new beginning. A future where our species and humans are no longer enemies." The room was divided. Daniel's fists clenched. He had seen enough war to know that fear often led to violence. And right now, the fear in this room was dangerous. Soraya, sitting on her throne, remained calm. Her golden eyes swept over the council, her expression unreadable. Then she stood. The room fell silent. "I understand your fears," Soraya said, her voice commanding. "This is unexpected for all of us, but do not mistake fear for weakness." She took a step forward. "This child is proof that our species are not so different. We have been at war for too long, and we are no closer to victory. Perhaps the time has come to change the way we see the universe." Some of the council members murmured in agreement, but the opposition remained strong. One of Soraya's most trusted generals, Vortek, stepped forward. His dark eyes were cold as he bowed slightly. "My queen, with all respect, this child is dangerous." Daniel stepped closer to Soraya, his protective instincts kicking in. "How is a child dangerous?" Vortek's gaze flickered to him. "Because it will divide our empire. It already has. A deadly decision." That night, Soraya and Daniel remained in her private chambers, the tension from the council meeting still heavy in the air. Soraya stood by the window, looking out over the city. "I knew this would not be easy, but I did not expect so much resistance." Daniel leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "They're afraid of change." She sighed. "Fear can turn into hatred." Daniel walked closer to her. "What do we do now?" Soraya turned to face him. "We prepare. There are those who will try to harm this child before it is even born." Daniel felt a chill at her words. The idea of someone trying to kill Soraya, trying to kill their child, sent a wave of anger through him. "No one's going to touch you," he said firmly. Soraya gave him a small, tired smile. "You cannot protect me from an entire empire, Daniel." Daniel met her gaze. "Watch me." Betrayal in the shadows. They didn't have to wait long for the first attack. It happened just before dawn. Daniel woke to the sound of movement outside the chambers. His instincts screamed danger. He grabbed his weapon and moved silently toward the door. Before he could reach it, the doors burst open. Exiled assassins, dressed in dark armor, rushed in, their weapons drawn. Soraya reacted instantly, her golden eyes glowing as she unleashed a wave of energy, sending two attackers flying. Daniel didn't hesitate. He charged forward, taking down one assassin with a single blow. He grabbed another by the arm, twisting it sharply before knocking them unconscious. The fight was brutal, but they were stronger. Within minutes, the assassins were either dead or captured. Breathing heavily, Daniel turned to Soraya. "Are you all right?" She nodded, but her expression was grim. One of the captured assassins groaned, and Soraya stepped forward, her gaze sharp. "Who sent you?" The assassin hesitated, then spat out a single name. "Vortek." Daniel's blood boiled. The same general who had opposed the child in the council. Soraya's expression darkened. "This is just the beginning." Daniel clenched his fists. He had known things would get dangerous, but now it was personal. The empire was no longer just divided, it was at war with itself. And Daniel would do whatever it took to protect Soraya and their unborn child. Daniel stood over the captured assassin, his breathing heavy, his mind racing. The name Vortek echoed in his thoughts. It wasn't just a coup. This was war. A war within the Scifi Empire, and Soraya's life was the target. Soraya turned to her guards. "Take him away. Find out who else is involved." The guards dragged the assassin out, but the tension in the room remained. Daniel clenched his fists. "We can't stay here. It's not safe." Soraya sighed. "I know." She was still strong, still regal, but Daniel could see the worry in her golden eyes. He had learned to read her expressions, the small changes in her stance, the slight hesitation in her voice. She wasn't afraid for herself. She was afraid for their child. A desperate plan. By morning, news of the attack had spread. The palace was on high alert, and the High Council was divided more than ever. Some demanded Vortex's arrest, while others secretly supported him. Daniel and Soraya met in a hidden chamber deep beneath the palace. Only her most loyal guards knew of this place. "We can't fight them here," Daniel said. "Not when we don't know who's on our side." Soraya paced, her robes flowing behind her. "If we leave, they will take the throne. Then we take it back later," Daniel said firmly. "Right now, we need to keep you and the baby safe." Soraya's gaze softened. "You are willing to leave everything behind?" Daniel shrugged. "I never planned to stay in an alien palace anyway." Soraya chuckled, but it quickly faded. "There is a place, a hidden sanctuary, deep in exiled space. My brother, Prince Vale, has been in exile for years. He might help us." Daniel nodded. "Then that's where we go." The escape begins. They left under the cover of darkness. Soraya wore a simple cloak to hide her identity. Daniel, dressed in stolen Scifi armor, walked beside her, acting as her guard. They moved quickly through the city, avoiding patrols. Every shadow felt dangerous, every passing Scifi a potential enemy. As they neared the docking bay, Daniel's instincts flared. Something's wrong. Soraya stopped. "What?" Daniel scanned the area. Then he saw them. A group of armed soldiers, loyal to Vortex, waiting near the ships. It was an ambush. Fighting for freedom. Daniel pulled Soraya into the shadows. "Stay here." She grabbed his wrist. "No, we fight together." Daniel sighed. "You really don't know how to stay back, do you?" Soraya smirked. "You should know that by now, human." The first enemy stepped forward, and Daniel didn't wait. He moved fast, using his training to take down the nearest soldier. Soraya unleashed a wave of energy, sending 2 more flying. But there were too many. A soldier grabbed Soraya's arm, trying to pull her away. She struggled, but Daniel got there first, slamming his fist into the enemy's face. "Get to the ship," he shouted. Soraya hesitated, then ran. Daniel followed, covering her as she reached the small vessel. He jumped into the pilot's seat, quickly starting the engines. Outside, more soldiers were approaching. Soraya activated the shields. "Go now." Daniel gritted his teeth and launched the ship into the sky. As they broke through the atmosphere, Soraya let out a breath of relief. But Daniel knew this was far from over. A new journey. Hours later, they sat in the quiet of space, the hum of the ship the only sound. Soraya looked out the window, her expression unreadable. "I never thought I would flee my own empire." Daniel sat beside her. "You're not running. You're protecting the future." She turned to him, her golden eyes filled with emotion. "You always see things differently." Daniel smiled. "That's the human way." Soraya placed a hand over her stomach. "Do you think our child will be safe?" Daniel's expression hardened. "I'll make sure of it." Soraya nodded. "Then let us find my brother. Let us see if he still believes in the future." As the ship drifted through the stars, Daniel knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning of their fight. The ship moved through deep space, silent and unseen. Daniel sat in the pilot's seat, his hands steady on the controls, but his mind was restless. Beside him, Soraya gazed out at the stars, her golden eyes filled with unspoken thoughts. They had escaped the palace, but they were far from safe. Vortek and his followers would not stop hunting them. He saw their child as a threat to the Empire, and he would do anything to erase that threat. Soraya's voice broke the silence. "We are close." Daniel checked the ship's navigation. Ahead, a distant planet loomed, its surface glowing with silver-blue light. "Are you sure your brother will help us?" Daniel asked. Soraya hesitated. "Vale has lived in exile for years. He was once my strongest ally, but time changes people." Daniel sighed. "Let's hope he still has a reason to fight." The Hidden Prince. They landed near an ancient fortress built into the side of a rocky mountain. As they stepped out, a group of Scifi warriors surrounded them. Their weapons were drawn, their eyes filled with suspicion. A tall figure stepped forward. Prince Vale. His silver armor gleamed under the moonlight, and his dark eyes studied Soraya with caution. "Sister," he said at last, "you have come." Soraya nodded. "I need your help." Vale glanced at Daniel, then at Soraya's stomach. His eyes widened slightly. "So the rumors are true." Soraya lifted her chin. "Yes, I am carrying a child, and Vortek will kill us if we do not stop him." Vale exhaled. "You have brought great danger to my doorstep." Daniel stepped forward. "Then help us fight." Vale studied him for a long moment. Then, to Daniel's surprise, he smiled slightly. "You are bold, human." Soraya's voice softened. "Vale, please, if we do not stop Vortek now, our empire will fall into his hands. This child is the future." Val's expression hardened. "Then we fight." Preparing for war. Within hours, Val's forces were ready. They were fewer than Vortek's army, but they were stronger, faster, and determined. Daniel trained alongside the Scifi warriors, earning their respect. He showed them human tactics, how to fight with strategy, how to turn their enemy's strength against them. Soraya prepared in her own way. She strengthened her energy abilities, training harder than ever. Though she carried a child, she refused to be weak. The night before battle, Daniel found Soraya standing alone on the fortress balcony. "You should rest," he said. She turned to him. "So should you." Daniel smirked. "Can't. Too much on my mind." Soraya sighed. "Tomorrow, we may win, or we may lose everything." Daniel stepped closer. "Then we make sure we win." Soraya met his gaze, and for the first time, he saw something in her eyes that he had never seen before. Hope. The battle begins. Dawn arrived with fire and fury. Vortek's fleet descended upon the fortress, his soldiers pouring onto the battlefield. Daniel fought with everything he had. He moved through the chaos, taking down enemies one by one. He was outnumbered, but he wasn't afraid. Soraya stood at the front lines, her golden energy blasting through enemy ranks. She was a warrior queen, unbreakable and fierce. Then she saw him. Vortek. He stood at the edge of the battlefield, watching her with cold hatred. "This ends today," Soraya said. Vortek smirked. "Yes, it does." The final confrontation. Soraya and Vortek clashed in a battle of power and skill. Energy crackled in the air as their attacks collided. Daniel saw the fight and ran toward them. He wasn't going to let Soraya face this alone. Vortek struck hard, forcing Soraya to her knees. But before he could land the final blow, Daniel tackled him to the ground. They fought, fists and weapons colliding. Vortek was strong, but Daniel was stronger. He had something to fight for. With one final strike, Daniel knocked Vortek down. Soraya stood, her hands glowing with power. "You will never harm my child." Vortek tried to speak, but it was too late. With a final blast of energy, Soraya ended the battle. A new dawn. As the battlefield fell silent, the Scifi warriors cheered. Vale stepped forward. "The war is over." Soraya turned to Daniel, her eyes shining. "We did it." Daniel exhaled. "Yeah, we did." He placed a hand on her stomach. "And now, We have a future to build. Soraya smiled. Together. As the sun rose over the battlefield, Daniel knew one thing. This was just the beginning. The beginning of a new era, a new empire, and a new hope. The battlefield was silent. The war was over. Daniel stood beside Soraya, his body aching from the fight, but his heart steady. They had won. Vortek was defeated, and the rebellion was crushed. The exiled soldiers, once divided, now stood united behind Soraya. They had witnessed her strength, her courage, and her determination to protect not just her people, but also the future she carried within her. Prince Vale stepped forward, his silver armor reflecting the rising sun. The traitors have fallen. The empire is yours once more, Soraya. Soraya met her brother's gaze, then turned to her people. She raised her hand, and the soldiers knelt in respect. The war is over, she declared. No more bloodshed, no more division. Today we rebuild. Not as conquerors, not as enemies, but as one people. The warriors roared in agreement, their voices echoing across the battlefield. Daniel exhaled, his grip tightening around the hilt of his blade. It was finally over. But deep inside, he knew this was just the beginning. A queen's promise. Later that evening, in the safety of the royal palace, Soraya sat on her throne once more. The halls were no longer filled with tension and betrayal. Instead, there was peace, uncertain but real. Daniel stood beside her, his arms crossed. What happens now? Soraya looked down at her stomach. Now we prepare for the future. Vale approached them, his expression thoughtful. There will be challenges ahead. Not everyone will accept this union between humans and Scifi. Daniel smirked. Let them try. We're not going anywhere. Soraya chuckled softly, then turned serious. Vale, I want you to be my second in command. Together, we will ensure that this empire remains strong. Vale hesitated, then bowed. It would be my honor, sister. Soraya then looked at Daniel. And you? Daniel raised an eyebrow. Me? Soraya nodded. You have fought beside me, risked your life for me. And now you are part of this empire's future. Will you stay? Daniel was silent for a moment. He thought of Earth, of the life he had left behind. But then he looked at Soraya, at the fire in her golden eyes, at the life they had created together. There was no choice to make. I'm staying, he said firmly. Soraya's lips curled into a rare, genuine smile. Then we move forward, together. A future begins. Weeks passed, and the empire began to heal. The remaining rebels were dealt with, and the people slowly embraced the changes Soraya brought. Daniel trained alongside the Scifi warriors, earning their respect. Some still looked at him with curiosity, some with hesitation, but none doubted his strength. Meanwhile, Soraya prepared for the arrival of their child. She was still the powerful queen, but there was a softer side to her now, a warmth she had once hidden. One evening, Daniel found her standing on the palace balcony, gazing at the stars. You all right? He asked, stepping beside her. Soraya nodded. Yes, just thinking. About what? She placed a hand over her stomach. About our child. What kind of future they will have. Daniel took her hand in his grip steady. A strong one. A future where they don't have to choose between being Scifi or human. They'll be both. Soraya turned to him, her golden eyes shining. Do you truly believe that? Daniel smirked. I do. Because if there's one thing humans are good at, it's surviving. Soraya chuckled, then rested her head against his shoulder. Then we will make sure our child not only survives, but thrives. Daniel wrapped an arm around her, looking out at the stars. A new era had begun, one where humans and Scifi could stand together. And at the heart of it all was their child, the bridge between two worlds. Daniel didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. They would face it together.